1 month after my daughter's wedding, the photographer called me and whispered, "Sir, I noticed something terrible in the photos. Come immediately, alone, and don't say anything to your daughter." The phone rang just as I sat down with my morning coffee. Tuesday morning, quiet house. Financial reports spread across my desk. The kind of peaceful moment I believed I'd earned after 40 years building Morgan Hardware. 3 stores across the Phoenix metro. Good business, good life. I almost didn't answer the unknown number. "Mr. Morgan?" A woman's voice, trembling. "This is Carolyn Thornton. I photographed Jenna's wedding last month. I need to see you immediately. Alone. Please don't tell your daughter." My hand tightened around the phone. "What's wrong?" "I can't explain over the phone. But I found something in the photographs. Something very serious." The air in my office changed, thin somehow. "What kind of something?" "Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. My studio downtown. Please, Mr. Morgan, come alone." Before I could respond, Wendy's voice exploded from the kitchen. "Dad, I told you 3 times already, I need that car. My Honda is embarrassing. You promised you'd ask him today." Brian's laugh rumbled from the living room, the TV blaring beneath it. "I'll be there," I said into the phone, barely hearing myself. Carolyn exhaled shakily. "Thank you. I'm so sorry, Mr. Morgan. I really am." She hung up. I sat motionless at my desk, the phone still pressed to my ear, staring at the framed photograph on my wall, Jenna in her wedding dress, radiant. Samuel beside her in his tux, handsome and confident. 1 month ago. $65,000 I'd spent on that day. Worth every penny to see my eldest daughter happy. But something very serious in the photographs? "Dad!" Wendy appeared in my doorway, phone in hand, car keys in the other. "Did you hear me? I need money for a new car. Melissa got a new Lexus and I can't keep showing up in that piece of junk." I looked at my youngest daughter, 29 years old, living in my house for nearly 4 years now. "Just temporary," she'd said when moving in after her divorce. Brian had followed 6 months later. "No rent. No end date." "We'll talk later," I said. "I need to go to the dealership this week." "Later, Wendy." She huffed, stomped up the stairs, and slammed her door. The day crawled. I tried focusing on inventory reports, projections, payroll schedules, but my mind circled back to Carolyn's voice. The wedding had been perfect. Hadn't it? At noon, Brian wandered into my office without knocking. He never knocked. "Hey, Pops." He leaned against the doorframe like he owned the place. "Wendy says you're being weird about the car thing." I said we'd discuss it later. I kept my eyes on my computer screen. "Yeah, but she's set on it. Maybe just give her the money, keep the peace." He grinned. "Happy wife, happy life, right?" They weren't married. I turned to the window, watching the pool shimmer behind the house and the guest house where Wendy and Brian lived. Kitchen, 2 bedrooms, private entrance. I'd built it dreaming of visiting grandkids someday. Instead, it held 2 freeloaders. That evening, Jenna arrived, perfect as always. Tailored blazer, designer jeans, polished smile. "Hi, Dad," she said, kissing my cheek. "I was in the neighborhood." Paradise Valley to Scottsdale isn't the neighborhood, but I let it go. She sat, crossed her legs, studied the room like she was appraising it. "Samuel and I found an incredible place in Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, pool, mountain views. But we need the down payment fast. Just $40,000. $40,000 said like she was asking for a ride to the airport. Something hollow opened in my chest. "Let me think about it," I said. Her smile faltered for half a second. "Don't take too long. The house won't wait." When she left, the feeling didn't fade. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. And tomorrow morning I would find out what. I drove to Carolyn's studio in downtown Phoenix, a converted warehouse in the Arts District. She met me at the door, nervous, apologetic. "Mr. Morgan, I wish I didn't have to show you this." I followed her to her editing room. She pulled up Jenna's wedding photos. Beautiful, perfect shots. Then she opened a second folder. 2 hours before the ceremony, she said quietly, I was testing exposures from a terrace. She clicked. Samuel, my son-in-law, pressed against a red-haired woman. Kissing her. Hands tangled. Intimate. Familiar. Not my daughter. My breath caught. How long before the ceremony? 2 hours. The metadata is all here. More photos. Different angles. No mistakes. No confusion. The red-haired woman wore a wedding ring. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Carolyn pulled out a flash drive. All the photos. Metadata. Documentation. I thought you should have it. I took the drive, my hand shaking. Thank you, I said. You did the right thing. Driving home, the truth sliced through every memory of the wedding. Why marry Jenna at all? Why go through the expensive ceremony if he loved someone else? Unless the ceremony wasn't the point at all. Unless the money was. Back home, I walked into my house, and Brian didn't even look up from my recliner. Hey old man, grab me another beer while you're up. Wendy called from upstairs. Dad, I need money for the spa this weekend. Something inside me snapped. I closed the door quietly behind me. They thought I was the same man who'd left that morning. They were wrong. Sleep didn't stand a chance that night. I sat in my office long after midnight, the flash drive from Carolyn on the desk next to my laptop like a small, poisonous stone. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Samuel's face in those photos, calm, confident, kissing a married woman 2 hours before saying vows to my daughter. Not a mistake. A choice. I opened my laptop and pulled up the old wedding budget spreadsheet. $65,000 of my money. Venue. Catering. Photographer. Flowers. Makeup. Every line looked different now. One detail snagged in my memory. The wedding gifts. Jenna had insisted on cash only. No registry, Dad, she'd said. We're starting fresh. Cash is just more practical. At the time, I'd admired her practicality. Now I wasn't so sure. I grabbed a legal pad and started jotting numbers. 200 guests. Mostly my business associates, old friends, people who'd known my girls since they were toddlers. The gift table had been buried in envelopes. Jenna had hired someone specifically to handle them, so nothing gets lost. A week after the wedding, she'd called me, laughing. Dad, we ended up with about $45,000 in gifts. People were so generous. We're so blessed. I wrote, cash and checks from guests, $45,000. Then I remembered my business partner, Marcus Chen, handing Samuel a separate envelope at the reception, right in front of me. Welcome to the family, son, Marcus had said. Start your life right. I knew Marcus. He didn't write small checks. 15,000, Jenna had told me later, almost casually. Can you believe it, Dad? Marcus is amazing. I added it to the pad. Marcus's separate gift, $15,000. Wedding gifts alone, $60,000. On top of the $65,000 I'd spent on the event. I stared at the total until the numbers blurred. Why marry Jenna at all if Samuel was already involved with someone else? Unless the wedding itself was an investment. A payday. The thought made my stomach turn. At 7 a.m. I showered, dressed, and drove into downtown Phoenix. I told Wendy nothing, left before Brian even woke up. The bank opened at 9. I met with Patricia Williams, the branch manager I'd worked with for 15 years. Morning, Mr. Morgan, she said as I sat down. What can I help you with today? I just want to verify a check I wrote, I said lightly. A wedding gift for my daughter. I wrote a $20,000 check to Jenna and Samuel. Want to be sure it cleared properly. She typed, scanned the screen, and nodded. Here it is. Yes, it cleared. Deposited into a joint account belonging to Samuel Fisher and Jenna Morgan Fisher. I forced my voice to stay casual. Joint account, huh? When did they open that? Patricia scrolled a bit deeper. Looks like May 10th. So, about 2 months before the wedding. 2 months. Not years. Not when they got engaged. 2 months before the big cash event. We live in fast times, I said, smiling like nothing was wrong. Kids move quickly these days. She laughed politely. I thanked her and left. In the truck, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, staring at the dashboard. 2 months before the wedding, They open a joint account. That account receives my $20,000 check, $45,000 in cash and gifts, $15,000 from Marcus, $80,000 tied directly to the wedding. The wedding that preceded an affair I now knew had started long before the ceremony. The drive home felt surreal, like my truck was piloting itself. When I pulled into the garage and stepped into the hallway, I heard Wendy's voice drifting down from upstairs. "Yeah, Dad's been acting weird lately," she said loudly into her phone. She always talked like the person was in another state with no signal. "I don't know, he just feels suspicious or something. But don't worry, Jenna, we can stretch this another 6 months easy." I froze midway up the stairs. By then he'll cave and buy us that condo just to get rid of us. Silence, then Jenna's voice through the tinny phone speaker, loud enough to hear. "Perfect," she said. "I've got, 2 more months of playing happy wife? Then I file. Half those gifts are legally mine in Arizona. Samuel already agreed to a 60/40th split. Easiest $45,000 I ever made." My hand found the railing. Wendy laughed. "And Samuel's little girlfriend doesn't even know about the plan. This is perfect. Dad's so busy feeling proud of your marriage, he doesn't see anything. Keep him distracted. Make him think you need something big. That way, when you ask for the house down payment, it won't seem excessive by comparison." "Already on it," Jenna said. "I asked him for $40,000 for a down payment yesterday. He looked annoyed, but he'll come around. He always does." I backed away slowly, careful not to make the stairs creak. When I reached my office, I shut the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. 2 daughters. One planning to divorce her husband to steal wedding money they'd intentionally pooled. The other camping in my house for free, squeezing me for a car, spa days, and future condos. And they were laughing about it. I walked to my desk, sat down, and opened my browser. I typed, "Property Lawyer Phoenix, Arizona Asset Protection Eviction." One name stood out on the results page, Robert McKenzie. 25 years of real estate law, family trusts, asset protection. I booked the earliest available appointment. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Mackenzie's office sat on the 23rd floor of a glass building downtown, polished, quiet, professional. I arrived 10 minutes early and spent them in the parking garage organizing my folder, wedding spreadsheets, printed notes from last night, bullet points of what I'd overheard, the flash drive from Carolyn. The elevator ride up felt longer than it really was. I'd negotiated supplier contracts. I'd handled layoffs and expansions. None of it felt like this. This was my family. Or what I'd thought was my family. The receptionist greeted me, then ushered me into Mackenzie's office. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over Phoenix. A wall of law books. Framed degrees. Everything neat, controlled. Mackenzie stood and extended his hand. "Mr. Morgan, I'm Robert. Please have a seat. Coffee? Just black, please." He poured, sat, and picked up his pen. "I read your intake form," he said. "You mention property issues, family conflict, and estate concerns. Why don't you walk me through what's going on in your own words?" I opened my manila folder and laid it on the desk between us. "A month ago I paid for my daughter's wedding," I said. $65,000. 3 days ago, the photographer showed me pictures of my son-in-law kissing another woman, 2 hours before the ceremony. Mackenzie raised an eyebrow slightly, but stayed silent, taking notes. "Yesterday," I continued, "I overheard a phone call between my daughters." I flipped to my handwritten notes. My eldest, Jenna, said, 2 more months and I file for divorce. Half those gifts are legally mine in Arizona. Samuel already agreed to 60/40ths. Easiest $45,000 I ever made. His pen stopped. "And your younger daughter?" he asked. "Wendy," I said. "Been living in my guest house with her boyfriend for almost 4 years. No rent, no lease." She told Jenna, "We can stretch this another 6 months easy. By then he'll cave and buy us that condo just to get rid of us." I slid the flash drive across his desk. "The affair photos are on there," I said. "Complete metadata, timestamps, GPS." He plugged it into his computer, clicked through a few images, and his jaw tightened. "And what do you want to accomplish?" he asked quietly. "I want them out of my house," I said. "Wendy and her boyfriend. Legally. Cleanly. And I want to make sure neither of my daughters ever gets their hands on my house, my business, or my savings when I'm gone. At least, not beyond what the law forces me to leave them." He nodded slowly. "In Arizona," Mackenzie began, "property law is very clear. Your house is yours. If there's no written rental agreement with Wendy and her boyfriend, they're essentially guests. Under state law, you have the right to begin eviction proceedings." He pulled a thick volume from the shelf behind him, Arizona Property Code, and opened it to a flagged section. "Standard timeline is 30 days from written notice," he said. "You serve a formal notice. They have 30 days to vacate. If they refuse, we file for forcible detainer in court and the sheriff enforces removal." "They can't fight it?" I asked. "Not successfully," he said. "No lease. No rental history. No payment record. The law is on your side." Something loosened in my chest. "And the rest?" I asked. "The business. The house. Savings. I don't want them circling like vultures when I die." "That's where an irrevocable trust comes in," he said. "We transfer your major assets, house, business interests, savings, into the trust. You remain in control during your lifetime. Upon your death, distribution follows your instructions. Properly structured, it's extremely difficult to challenge." He scribbled a quick diagram on his legal pad and turned it toward me. "A will can be contested," he said. "Family claims undue influence, lack of capacity, whatever. A trust created while you're clearly competent and acting voluntarily? A much higher bar." "How soon can we start?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "Today. My total fee for the eviction work, updated will, and full trust creation is $8,500. The trust portion alone usually runs $6,000, but I'll bundle it given how closely everything is tied together." I thought of the $65,000 wedding, the $80,000 in gifts and checks, the 4 years of free room and board for Wendy and Brian, the endless, "Dad, can you help us with," conversations. "Do it," I said. He brought out an engagement agreement, slid it over, and I read every line like I'd taught my managers to do with vendor contracts. Timelines. He waited, patient. I signed. He countersigned. When he finished, he looked at me across the desk. "Mr. Morgan," he said, "I need to be absolutely clear. Once we serve the eviction notices and finalize the trust, your relationship with your daughters will likely be damaged beyond repair. They won't see this as protection. They'll see it as betrayal. There is no soft version of what you're doing." I met his eyes. "They destroyed it when they turned me into a wallet," I said. "I'm just catching up." He nodded once. "Then we're aligned. I'll have your eviction notices ready by Friday. Serve them personally if you can, then the 30-day clock starts." On the drive home, my phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Jenna, Dad, did you think about the down payment? We really need an answer. The house won't last forever." I stared at the message for several long seconds. Then I deleted it. I didn't respond. The envelopes arrived Friday morning. Heavy paper, Mackenzie's firm name in the upper left. 2 copies inside. One for Wendy, one for Brian. I set them on my desk and tried to work, but my attention kept flicking to the envelopes. By evening, I could hear Wendy and Brian in the living room. The TV was on. Brian's voice carried over it, animated. "I'm telling you," he said, "craft breweries are huge right now. Phoenix is perfect. We just need about 30 grand to get started. Your dad would see returns in a year, easy money." Wendy laughed. "He'll do it. He always does. Just frame it as helping family, and he'll write the check." I walked in and placed the 2 envelopes on the coffee table. They both looked up, smiling, assuming it was a check, maybe, or papers about Brian's fake brewery. "What's this?" Wendy asked, reaching for hers. "Official eviction notice," I said calmly. "You have 30 days to find another place to live." Her smile vanished. She tore it open, eyes racing over the first lines. Her face went pale. Brian ripped his envelope open, read faster than she did, and then stood up, fists clenched. "Have you lost your mind, old man?" he snapped. "This is our home. This is my house," I said. "You are guests. Guests who've overstayed. You can't just kick us out," Wendy said, tears already forming. "I'm your daughter, Brian, and I don't have anywhere else to go. How can you do this to us?" I looked at her, feeling strangely calm. "You've lived here for nearly 4 years without paying a cent in rent," I said. "You've treated my home like a hotel and me like an ATM. You have 30 days. That's more generosity than I've gotten from either of you in years." Brian took a step toward me, jaw tight. "Everyone's going to know what kind of father you are," he said. "Throwing your own daughter out on the street. People talk. Then they can talk," I said. "The notice is legal. 30 days. I suggest you start packing." Wendy reached for my arm. "Dad, please, we can work this out. We'll pay rent, will?" I gently removed her hand. "No," I said, and walked toward my office. "You'll regret this," Brian shouted after me. I closed my office door and turned the lock. Outside, chaos erupted, raised voices, muffled sobs, the scrape of furniture. I sat at my desk and listened, not with pleasure, but with a strange sense of clarity. 10 minutes later, the noise dropped to intense whispers. I moved quietly to the door, listening. "I don't know what happened," Wendy was saying, voice shaking over speakerphone. He was ice cold. Like we were strangers. "He gave us eviction papers, Jenna." The pause. Jenna's voice came through, calm and calculating. "Okay, listen. We'll come over tomorrow. Bring Samuel. We'll straighten this out. He won't go through with it once we talk to him together." "Tomorrow?" Wendy sniffled. "You promise?" "Yes." "Tomorrow," Jenna said. "Bring the papers to the table. We'll figure this out. Just don't panic." There was a low murmur, Brian's voice, angry and indistinct. Then Wendy again. "He's going to regret this, Jenna. I swear he's going to regret this." I stepped back to my desk, opened my notebook, and started writing dates, direct quotes, their reactions, threats, every detail Mackenzie might need if this turned ugly. My phone buzzed on the desk. Text from Jenna. "Jenna, Dad," Wendy called me. "We need to talk. Samuel and I are coming over tomorrow. This has gone too far." I looked at the message until the screen dimmed and went dark. Tomorrow, they'd come with their performance. Reasonable voices, practiced concern, logical arguments, guilt, and tears. They didn't know that I'd already seen the script. And this time, I wasn't playing my old role. Saturday morning, I came downstairs to find Wendy sprawled across the couch in her bathrobe. Her hair was a mess, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "Dad," she whimpered dramatically, pressing a hand to her forehead, "I can't get up. My heart is racing. I think I'm having a panic attack. The stress from the eviction, you should call a doctor." Brian stood beside her, arms crossed, playing the concerned partner. They watched me the way a pair of cats watch a bird, calculating, waiting for the right emotional hook. I walked past them toward the kitchen. "There's cold medicine in the cabinet," I said calmly. "You'll be fine." Silence. Then Wendy let out a frustrated, breathy sigh, the kind she used to give when she was a teenager and didn't get the newest phone she wanted. I poured a cup of coffee and went to my office, closed the door, and stayed there until noon. Sunday afternoon, Brian blocked me in the garage doorway as I tried to leave for the hardware store. He planted his body directly in front of mine, close enough that I could smell stale beer on his breath. "You know what people are going to say?" he demanded. "That you threw out your own daughter. Your pregnant daughter." Wendy wasn't pregnant. Just another lie, another last-second manipulation attempt. I checked my watch. "The eviction is legal," I said. "You have 26 days left. Move." He didn't. We stood there idle. 10 seconds. 20. He was trying to intimidate me. The old me might have backed down. But the old me was gone. Finally, he stepped aside. Not because he wanted to, because he realized intimidation wasn't going to work anymore. I left and spent 3 hours at my store, walking aisles, talking to managers, restoring the sense of competence and clarity that home had been draining from me for years. When I returned that evening, an envelope lay on my kitchen counter. Neat handwriting on the front. Proposal. Inside, 2 typed pages. Brian's handwriting annotated in the margins. Investment opportunity, craft brewery partnership. Initial capital required, $50,000. Wendy and Brian remain in residence, paying nominal rent, $500 per month. They guarantee full repayment within 5 years. Promise me 50% equity in the non-existent brewery. Closing statement. This solves everything. We stay. You profit. Family stays together. $50,000. Up from the $30,000 he'd pitched on Friday. Desperate times breed inflated schemes. I folded the papers, walked into the living room where they sat pretending to watch TV, and handed the envelope back to Brian. No, I said. Wendy's face crumpled instantly. Dad, please, we're trying to compromise. No, I repeated, then turned and walked back to my office with my dinner. Behind me, the whispers started immediately. Angry, panicked, planning. It didn't matter. Their time was running out. Monday and Tuesday passed the same way, Wendy alternating between tearful apologies and cold silence, Brian bouncing between threats and bargaining. I maintained my routine. I wasn't playing their game anymore. On Wednesday, Jenna called. Dad, we're coming over for dinner, she announced, not asked. Samuel and I. We need to talk as a family. Her tone made it clear that declining wasn't an option she recognized. At 6 p.m., Jenna and Samuel arrived, arms full of groceries, an attempt at harmony, control, or both. The front door opened without knocking. Dad, Jenna said brightly, walking in like she owned the place. We're cooking tonight. You work too hard. Samuel shook my hand firmly. Hope you don't mind us showing up, he said. Jenna was worried about you. They moved around my kitchen like a well-rehearsed pair, setting up cutting boards, opening cabinets without asking. Wendy descended from the stairs in full makeup and a fresh outfit, miraculously cured of her earlier medical emergency. Brian followed, dressed like he'd been preparing for a courtroom scene. They were coordinated, rehearsed. An intervention designed not for love, but for control. We sat down for dinner, chicken, rice, salad. It looked nice enough, but the atmosphere tasted like tension. Jenna poured wine for everyone except me. We've been talking, she said finally, pushing her hair back in that practiced, polished way that made people trust her instincts. So we've noticed this house must be a lot to manage on your own. All these rooms, all this space. It's too much for one person. Samuel picked up her cue. And with the market the way it is? You could sell this place for a fortune right now. Wendy nodded sympathetically. Dad, you shouldn't live alone in a house this big. A condo would be so much easier. So much safer. I cut my chicken and stayed silent. Jenna smiled warmly, too warmly. And whatever money you got from the sale could help all of us. Help Wendy and Brian get on their feet. Help Samuel and me with our house down payment. There was the real reason for the intervention. Everyone benefits, they said. Everyone, except me. I set down my fork. I'm not selling my house. Jenna let out a soft, almost condescending laugh. Dad, no one is pressuring you. We're just trying to help. I stood, placed my napkin beside my plate. Thank you for your concern. But I'm fine. Good night. I walked out. They sat frozen for several seconds. Then voices exploded behind me. Dad? Dad? Are you serious? You can't just walk away from this conversation. I closed myself in my office and locked the door. An hour later, I called Mackenzie. I need to see you tonight, I said. It's urgent. I'll be here in 30 minutes. When I heard car engines in the driveway, first Jenna's Mercedes, then Brian's dented sedan, I grabbed my keys and left through the garage. They hadn't seen the last move coming. Mackenzie was already at the office when I arrived. Lights on, forms laid out, a second attorney present. Jennifer Chan, estate planning specialist. We should accelerate the trust creation, Mackenzie said as soon as I entered. Tonight, if possible. Jennifer slid a stack of papers toward me. These documents, she said, tapping them neatly into alignment, will move your house, business interests, and major accounts into the irrevocable trust immediately. You retain full control while alive. After death, your daughters receive the minimum required by Arizona law. Nothing more. They cannot challenge it. I signed. Page after page, line after line, initials, signatures, witness signatures, notary seals. 40 minutes later, my entire life's work was legally protected. Untouchable. We finished close to midnight. When I arrived home, the house was quiet, only the living room lamp still on, 2 empty wine glasses beside it. They had been there. They had talked. They had planned. Maybe they sensed the shift. Maybe they didn't. Either way, it no longer mattered. Tomorrow, or the day after, or the next week, they would realize the truth. Their influence was over. Their leverage was gone. Their access was ended. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Jenna. No messages. She didn't need to leave one. She already knew something had changed. I turned off the lights and went upstairs. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. 2 weeks passed after the eviction notices were served. 15 days remained. I set the dining room table myself that night. 5 place settings arranged neatly, cloth napkins, real silverware, the good china I hadn't used since the girls were teenagers. Each plate perfectly aligned. Water glasses filled. A quiet, deliberate setup. In front of my seat, I placed a manila folder face down. Inside it were 8 printed photographs, time-stamped, geotagged, of Samuel Fisher kissing a red-haired married woman 2 hours before his wedding to my daughter. I had invited everyone: Jenna, Samuel, Wendy, and Brian. A family dinner. The reality was closer to a battlefield. Jenna and Samuel arrived first, 15 minutes early as always, to assert control. I heard them whispering with Wendy and Brian in the living room, coordinating strategy, deciding who would speak first, who would cry, who would play the voice of logic. Let them plan. They settled at the table, exchanging tense, strategic glances. They were waiting for me to start, waiting for the opening to push their agenda. I served dinner, roasted chicken, vegetables, nothing fancy. My hands moved calmly, almost detached. We ate in forced silence for 10 minutes, silverware clinking, water glasses being sipped, the stiff posture of 4 people who thought they still had leverage. Then Jenna finally launched the attack. "Dad," she said gently, folding her napkin, "we've all been talking. The situation with Wendy is really stressful for everyone. We think it's time to make changes." Samuel nodded, his voice smooth and measured. "Harris, no one is criticizing you. But this house is too big for one person. The upkeep, the expenses, the responsibilities, why carry all that alone?" Wendy leaned forward, eyes soft, voice trembling just enough to sound genuine. "Dad, you shouldn't be alone here. It's not safe, it's not healthy. A condo would be smaller, easier, and you'd have money left over to help us." Brian joined in. "Selling now is smartman. Market's hot. You could help Jenna and Samuel with their down payment. Help us get on our feet, everybody wins. Everyone benefits. Except me." I set my fork down and picked up the manila folder. "Before we continue," I said calmly, "there's something you should see." Jenna's eyes narrowed. "What is this?" I slid the folder toward her. "Photographs," I said. "From your wedding. Specifically, the shots taken 2 hours before the ceremony." She opened the folder. The color drained from her face. The table fell silent. Wendy leaned forward for a look, eyes widening. Brian muttered, "Oh, them." Samuel's jaw clenched, then released, then clenched again. He looked everywhere except at the photos. I kept my voice even. 2 hours before your wedding, Jenna." I pointed to the timestamp. Samuel was on the terrace behind the restaurant kissing a red-haired woman. A married red-haired woman. Wearing a ring. Jenna swallowed hard but said nothing. I continued. "Carolyn, the photographer, documented everything. Metadata. GPS timestamps. Everything is verifiable." Samuel finally spoke, voice cracking. "That's not. Those pictures are taken out of context." I raised a hand. "Stop." He did. "Now," I said, "let's discuss the phone call I overheard between you and Wendy." Wendy stiffened. I opened my notebook and read it word for word. Jenna, I said, you told your sister, 2 more months and I file for divorce. Half the gifts are legally mine. Samuel already agreed to a 60/40th split. Easiest $45,000 I ever made. Jenna's mouth opened, closed, then opened again. That's someone must have. I kept going. And Wendy, I said, turning to her, you told Jenna, we can stretch this another 6 months easy. By then he'll cave and buy us that condo just to get rid of us. Wendy's eyes flooded instantly. Dad, that's not fair. You don't understand the... I cut her off. For 4 years, I said, you've lived in my house rent-free with your boyfriend. You've stolen my peace. You've manipulated every conversation into money. And you laughed, about scamming me for more. Brian stood suddenly, hands flat on the table. You spied on us? You had no right to. I raised my hand again. Sit down. To my surprise, he did. I straightened and delivered the final blow. I have created an irrevocable trust. My house, my business, my savings, everything is now protected. Upon my death, you will each receive the minimum Arizona requires. Not a penny more. Jenna surged to her feet. You can't do this, she shouted. We're your family. I stood too, calm, fully centered. Wendy and Brian have 15 days to vacate my home. After that, the sheriff will enforce it. Dinner is over. I walked out. Behind me, all hell broke loose. Jenna screaming at Samuel. Samuel swearing it wasn't what it looked like. Wendy crying, full meltdown. Brian slamming his fist on the table. Their voices mixed into a toxic storm. I walked down the hall, closed the office door, and locked it. Inside, I checked my email. Mackenzie had just sent a message. Trust documents ready for final signature. Need you here tomorrow morning. I replied. 9 a.m. The house raged behind me, shouts, tears, breaking illusions. For years, they'd plotted behind my back. Now, they watched everything unravel in front of them. I leaned back in my office chair, listening to the storm fade into exhausted silence. For the first time in a long time, I felt something new. Control. The next morning, Mackenzie's office smelled faintly of polished wood and fresh coffee. His paralegal and estate specialist, Jennifer Chan, sat across from me with a stack of documents as thick as a dictionary. Mr. Morgan, she said, everything is ready. This meeting finalizes the trust. I sat, took a breath, and began signing. Transfer of primary residence. Transfer of business ownership. Transfer of investment accounts. Designation of trustee. Distribution instructions. Amendments. Affidavits. Notarizations. My signature repeated, line after line. When the last page slid across the table, Jen tapped the line. This one, she said, makes everything official. I signed. She stamped it. Mackenzie leaned back in his chair. It's done, he said. Your assets are now legally protected. Even if your daughters hired the best attorneys in the state, they would struggle to carve out more than the statutory minimum. All I said was, thank you. I left the office feeling lighter than I had in years, stepping into a new life I didn't realize I'd been craving. The next 13 days became psychological warfare inside my own home. I found my coffee maker smashed on the kitchen floor. Brian lounged at the table reading a newspaper. That slipped out of my hands, he shrugged. Accidents happen. I swept the pieces into the trash. You have 11 days, I said. Wendy cried to the neighbor over the back fence. He's throwing us out with nowhere to go, she sobbed dramatically. I think he's losing it. Poor Mrs. Patterson looked uncomfortable but kind. I'm sure you'll work things out, dear. You won, I thought. Day 7. Jenna arrived with a woman holding a clipboard. Dad, this is Dr. Morrison, she said. We think you need to talk to someone. The psychologist smiled gently. Your daughters are concerned. Sudden decisions like this, evictions, legal changes, can indicate cognitive decline. Get out, I said. Both of them left. When I returned from the grocery store, my office door was ajar. On my desk, the trust document lay exactly where I left it, except the corner was bent. Someone had read it. That night, the house was unusually quiet. Their panic was finally real. Wendy knocked gently on my office door. "Dad?" she whispered. "Can we talk?" "Just us." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She sat in the chair across from me, clutching a tissue. "I've been thinking so much," she whispered. "You were right about Brian. He's not good for me. I see it now. I've made so many mistakes. Please, I'm begging you, give me another chance. I'll change. I'll be the daughter you deserve." The performance was flawless. But the problem wasn't Brian. It was Wendy. And the performance was for my money, not my forgiveness. "If you truly understood your mistakes," I said calmly, "you wouldn't be here asking for forgiveness as a bargaining chip. You'd be apologizing without expecting anything in return." Her expression shifted instantly, grief to anger, vulnerability to venom. "Fine," she snapped. "Be alone then. Don't expect us to care when something happens to you." I didn't respond. 8 days, Wendy," I said. "Start packing." She stormed out, slamming the bedroom door so hard the wall shook. Brian yelled something unintelligible. I sat at my desk, opened my calendar, and marked the day. 8 days until they are gone. My home, my peace, right around the corner. The 30th day arrived, eviction day. I pulled into my driveway at 10 a.m., the Arizona sun already baking the air. A sheriff's SUV rolled in right behind me, followed by Mackenzie's black sedan. We had coordinated the timing down to the minute. Deputy Martinez stepped out, a solid, experienced man in his late 40s with a no-nonsense presence. "Mr. Morgan," he said, shaking my hand. "Ready to proceed?" "Yes," I said. Mackenzie approached, carrying a leather briefcase. "All your documentation is in order. Today, we finalize everything." We walked to the front door together. Even though it was my house, I knocked. 3 firm, echoing knocks. Silence. Then Brian's voice, muffled from inside. "Go away. You can't do this." Deputy Martinez stepped forward, his tone shifting to official authority. "Brian Keller, this is Deputy Martinez with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Open the door now or I will open it myself. Failure to comply will result in criminal trespass charges." A long pause. Whispering. The door cracked open. Wendy's face appeared, red, puffy-eyed, expression swinging between indignation and panic. The deputy pushed the door wider and entered. Mackenzie and I followed. The living room was a disaster zone. Clothes everywhere, pizza boxes stacked on my coffee table, beer cans on the floor, trash strewn across the room. Not a single box packed. Deputy Martinez scanned the room with disappointment. "Ma'am, sir," he said, speaking clearly, "you were given 30 days' notice. You now have 2 hours to collect personal belongings. That means clothes and personal items only. No furniture. No fixtures. The clock starts now." 2 hours? Wendy shrieked. "That's impossible. We need at least a week." "You had 30 days," Martinez said flatly. 2 hours is generous." Brian stormed into the room, shirt wrinkled, hair unwashed. His face flushed with anger. "This is insane," he barked. "We have rights." Mackenzie opened his briefcase, calm as ever. "You have no rights to this property," he said. "There is no lease. No rental agreement. No rent paid. Legally you were guests. The 30 days have elapsed. You are now trespassing." Brian's eyes moved to me, full of betrayal. "You're really doing this," he said. "To your own daughter?" I met his stare evenly. "Yes." He shook his head in disgust and muttered something under his breath, but the deputy stepped closer, just enough to make the warning clear. Brian backed away. For the next 2 hours, the house echoed with chaos. Wendy sobbed while stuffing clothes into garbage bags. Brian angrily threw items into a duffel, muttering curses loud enough for me to hear. At his age, living in this giant place alone. Ungrateful old man. He'll regret this. Deputy Martinez corrected him sharply. "Sir, you are to pack your things. That's it. Keep your comments to yourself." I stayed near the doorway, out of the way but present enough to remind them whose house this was now. The 2 hours felt long, but necessary. When they had carried the last of their items to Wendy's old, dented sedan, the deputy walked them outside. Wendy turned to me one last time. Her tears vanished instantly, replaced with raw fury. "You'll regret this," she yelled. "Don't come crawling to us when you're old and alone." I looked at her steadily. "I won't," I said. Brian slammed the trunk. They got in the car. Wendy peeled out of the driveway. Just like that, after 4 years of freeloading, they were gone. The deputy handed me a clipboard. "They are officially vacated," he said. "If they return without permission, call us immediately. It becomes criminal trespass." "Thank you," I said. He nodded. "Take care, Mr. Morgan." Mackenzie shook my hand. "Congratulations," he said with a small smile. "Most people cave long before this point. You held strong." "I had to," I said. And I meant it. After they left, I walked slowly through my home, starting with the living room where Brian had basically lived on my recliner, then the kitchen, where Wendy had demanded money daily, and finally the guest house, where they'd slept, fought, schemed, and freeloaded for years. Every room felt lighter, quieter. That evening my phone rang. Jenna. I considered ignoring it. But part of me wanted to hear what she'd say, now that her allies were gone. I answered. Her voice was ice. "I hope you're satisfied." Silence from my end. "You've destroyed this family," she continued. "Everything we had, you threw it away." I glanced at a family photo on the shelf. The 3 of us smiling years ago. A different time. A different relationship. "You didn't destroy the family, Dad," she said. "You nuked it." "I didn't destroy anything," I said quietly. "I simply stopped funding its dysfunction." She inhaled sharply. "What does that even mean?" "You're speaking like a stranger." "I'm speaking like a man who's done being used." Silence. Then her voice cracked, just slightly. "You've changed," she whispered. "I don't even know who you are anymore." "I'm the same person," I said. "I just stopped pretending I didn't notice." Her tone hardened again. "Well, let's see how long you survive alone," she snapped. "You'll need us someday." She hung up. I set the phone on the counter. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Faded. When I returned from the grocery store, my office door was ajar. On my desk, the trust document lay exactly where I left it, except the corner was bent. Someone had read it. That night, the house was unusually quiet. Their panic was finally real. Wendy knocked gently on my office door. "Dad?" she whispered. "Can we talk?" "Just us." Against my better judgment, I opened the door. She sat in the chair across from me, clutching a tissue. "I've been thinking so much," she whispered. "You were right about Brian. He's not good for me. I see it now. I've made so many mistakes. Please, I'm begging you, give me another chance. I'll change. I'll be the daughter you deserve." The performance was flawless. But the problem wasn't Brian. It was Wendy. And the performance was for my money, not my forgiveness. "If you truly understood your mistakes," I said calmly, "you wouldn't be here asking for forgiveness as a bargaining chip. You'd be apologizing without expecting anything in return." Her expression shifted instantly, grief to anger, vulnerability to venom. "Fine," she snapped. "Be alone then. Don't expect us to care when something happens to you." I didn't respond. 8 days, Wendy," I said. "Start packing." She stormed out, slamming the bedroom door so hard the wall shook. Brian yelled something unintelligible. I sat at my desk, opened my calendar, and marked the day. 8 days until they are gone. My home, my peace, right around the corner. The 30th day arrived, eviction day. I pulled into my driveway at 10 a.m., the Arizona sun already baking the air. A sheriff's SUV rolled in right behind me, followed by Mackenzie's black sedan. We had coordinated the timing down to the minute. Deputy Martinez stepped out, a solid, experienced man in his late 40s with a no-nonsense presence. "Mr. Morgan," he said, shaking my hand. "Ready to proceed?" "Yes," I said. Mackenzie approached, carrying a leather briefcase. All your documentation is in order. Today, we finalize everything. We walked to the front door together. Even though it was my house, I knocked. 3 firm, echoing knocks. Silence. Then Brian's voice, muffled from inside. Go away. You can't do this. Deputy Martinez stepped forward, his tone shifting to official authority. Brian Keller, this is Deputy Martinez with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. Open the door now or I will open it myself. Failure to comply will result in criminal trespass charges. A long pause. Whispering. The door cracked open. Wendy's face appeared, red, puffy-eyed, expression swinging between indignation and panic. The deputy pushed the door wider and entered. Mackenzie and I followed. The living room was a disaster zone. Clothes everywhere, pizza boxes stacked on my coffee table, beer cans on the floor, trash strewn across the room. Not a single box packed. Deputy Martinez scanned the room with disappointment. Ma'am, sir, he said, speaking clearly, you were given 30 days' notice. You now have 2 hours to collect personal belongings. That means clothes and personal items only. No furniture. No fixtures. The clock starts now. 2 hours. Wendy shrieked. That's impossible. We need at least a week. You had 30 days, Martinez said flatly. 2 hours is generous. Brian stormed into the room, shirt wrinkled, hair unwashed. His face flushed with anger. This is insane, he barked. We have rights. Mackenzie opened his briefcase, calm as ever. You have no rights to this property, he said. There is no lease. No rental agreement. No rent paid. Legally you were guests. The 30 days have elapsed. You are now trespassing. Brian's eyes moved to me, full of betrayal. You're really doing this, he said. To your own daughter? I met his stare evenly. Yes. He shook his head in disgust and muttered something under his breath, but the deputy stepped closer, just enough to make the warning clear. Brian backed away. For the next 2 hours, the house echoed with chaos. Wendy sobbed while stuffing clothes into garbage bags. Brian angrily threw items into a duffel, muttering curses loud enough for me to hear. At his age, living in this giant place alone. Ungrateful old man. He'll regret this. Deputy Martinez corrected him sharply. Sir, you are to pack your things. That's it. Keep your comments to yourself. I stayed near the doorway, out of the way but present enough to remind them whose house this was now. The 2 hours felt long, but necessary. When they had carried the last of their items to Wendy's old, dented sedan, the deputy walked them outside. Wendy turned to me one last time. Her tears vanished instantly, replaced with raw fury. You'll regret this, she yelled. Don't come crawling to us when you're old and alone. I looked at her steadily. I won't, I said. Brian slammed the trunk. They got in the car. Wendy peeled out of the driveway. Just like that, after 4 years of freeloading, they were gone. The deputy handed me a clipboard. They are officially vacated, he said. If they return without permission, call us immediately. It becomes criminal trespass. Thank you, I said. He nodded. Take care, Mr. Morgan. Mackenzie shook my hand. Congratulations, he said with a small smile. Most people cave long before this point. You held strong. I had to, I said. And I meant it. After they left, I walked slowly through my home, starting with the living room where Brian had basically lived on my recliner, then the kitchen, where Wendy had demanded money daily, and finally the guest house, where they'd slept, fought, schemed, and freeloaded for years. Every room felt lighter, quieter. That evening my phone rang. Jenna. I considered ignoring it. But part of me wanted to hear what she'd say, now that her allies were gone. I answered. Her voice was ice. I hope you're satisfied. Silence from my end. You've destroyed this family, she continued. Everything we had, you threw it away. I glanced at a family photo on the shelf. The 3 of us smiling years ago. A different time. A different relationship. You didn't destroy the family, Dad, she said. You nuked it. I didn't destroy anything, I said quietly. I simply stopped funding its dysfunction. She inhaled sharply. What does that even mean? You're speaking like a stranger. I'm speaking like a man who's done being used. Silence. Then her voice cracked, just slightly. You've changed, she whispered. I don't even know who you are anymore. I'm the same person, I said. I just stopped pretending I didn't notice. Her tone hardened again. Well, let's see how long you survive alone, she snapped. You'll need us someday. She hung up. I set the phone on the counter. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. Silence again, comfortable this time. I surprised myself with the next words. Carolyn, would you like to get coffee sometime? A smile entered her voice before she even answered. Yes, she said quietly. I'd like that very much. How's next week? Next week is perfect. We said goodbye. I placed the phone down and let the moment sink in. Coffee with someone who didn't want anything from me except conversation. A small thing. A meaningful thing. As the morning sun lifted higher, warming the terrace, I sipped my coffee slowly. Everything felt right. For the first time in years, maybe decades, my life was finally mine. Not controlled. Not manipulated. Not drained. Not dictated by guilt or obligation. Just mine. The next chapter wasn't shaped by Wendy's demands. Or Jenna's expectations. Or Samuel's schemes. Or Brian's freeloading. The next chapter was shaped by me. A guitar waiting inside. People who actually valued my help. Coffee with someone honest. A peaceful home. A protected future. I stood and walked to the terrace railing, letting the desert wind brush across my face. My home. My life. My peace. Alone, but not lonely. Free, finally, to decide what I wanted. And for the first time since everything began, I was truly, quietly, undeniably happy. The week moved quietly, smooth, steady, peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in years. On Wednesday afternoon, I drove to my guitar lesson. My instructor, a patient middle-aged man named Carl, greeted me with a grin. You've been practicing, he said, noticing the improvement before I even sat down. Every day, I admitted. I've got time now. Time, he said thoughtfully, adjusting the tuning pegs on my guitar, is the one thing you can't get back. Good to see you using it well. He didn't know the details of my life, but his words struck deeper than he realized. We spent an hour practicing chord transitions, my fingers stumbling occasionally, but less often than before. When I drove home afterward with sore fingertips, I felt the kind of quiet satisfaction that had been missing for years. Purpose, not obligation. Growth, not survival. Life, not exhaustion. Friday, I headed to the senior center for my volunteer shift. The director, a warm older woman named Linda, greeted me with a smile bright enough to outshine the hallway lights. Our favorite handyman has arrived, she said, patting my shoulder. You ready to tackle today's list? Boys. I fixed a sticking door, tightened a wobbling banister, and unclogged a slow-draining bathroom sink. A resident named Mr. Alvarez watched me work with fascination. You any good with electrical? He asked hopefully. Depends on what's broken. He pointed at a desk lamp. It only turns on if I jiggle the cord just right. I opened it up and repaired a loose connection. He clapped like a kid seeing a magic trick. You have blessed hands, my friend, he said with a grin. I'm buying you lunch next week. It wasn't much, a moment shared over a broken lamp, but it meant something to both of us. A genuine exchange. No manipulation. No strings attached. Every thank you felt real. Every conversation felt human. Helping people who appreciated it felt like breathing fresh air after years inside a smoke-filled room. The next morning, I woke with a strange lightness in my chest. Coffee with Carolyn was today. I showered, shaved, put on a clean polo shirt, and left early. The cafe we chose sat in a quiet corner of downtown Phoenix, with shaded outdoor seating and big windows that caught the morning sun. I arrived first. A minute later, Carolyn walked up wearing a soft blue blouse, hair tied back casually, a camera bag slung over her shoulder. Mr. Morgan, she said warmly. Harris, I corrected, smiling. Harris, she echoed. We ordered coffee, then sat outside under a leafy patio umbrella. It felt natural, comfortable from the start. "How have you really been?" she asked after a sip. I took a moment to think. Not the reflex answer. The real one. "Better than I've been in a long time," I said. "It's quiet now. Peaceful." I didn't realize how much weight I was carrying until I set it down. She nodded slowly. "I'm glad. Truth can hurt, but it clears the air." "It does," I agreed. "And it saved me." Her eyes softened. "I worried showing you those pictures would destroy your family." "It didn't," I said. "It exposed what was already broken." We talked about her photography work, my old hardware stores, the places we'd each traveled. We talked about movies, favorite foods, the Arizona heatwave. We didn't talk about Jenna or Wendy or Samuel, not out of avoidance, but because there was no need. We stayed for almost 2 hours. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. "You know," she said, "I enjoyed this. More than I expected." "So did I said honestly. She smiled, a real smile, not a polite one. "Maybe we can do it again sometime?" "Absolutely." We said goodbye, and she walked away, the morning sun catching the camera strap on her shoulder. I felt something warm settle in my chest. Not love. Not longing. Just possibility. A life without chaos. A life with room for people who didn't want to drain me. A life where the future didn't feel like a burden. When I got home, the house greeted me with silence and sunlight. I walked through each room, not searching for anything, just appreciating. The guest house, once cluttered with Wendy and Brian's mess, now stood empty and echoing. For years, I looked at that space with dread. Now I saw potential. A workshop. A reading room. A home gym. A guest suite for people who visited by invitation, not entitlement. The possibilities were endless. I spent the afternoon cleaning the living room, reorganizing the shelves, dusting corners that hadn't been touched in years. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. Every task felt like reclaiming territory. A home that had been under siege now belonged to me again. In the evening, as the sky turned orange, I sat on the terrace with a cold drink. The desert stretched below me, shimmering in the dying light. My phone lay beside me, screen dark. No texts from Jenna. No calls from Wendy. No demands, no guilt, no emotional traps. Just silence. Beautiful, healing silence. I had spent years believing I was doing the right thing, funding my daughter's lifestyles, fixing their mistakes, absorbing their crises, paying for their choices, and confusing their dependence with closeness. But dependence is not love. Obligation is not family. And manipulation is not loyalty. I chose myself. And in choosing myself, I finally found peace. The trust was protected. The house was mine. The business secure. The leeches gone. I wasn't lonely. I was free. I looked out over the valley as the last sliver of sun dipped behind the mountains. The next chapter wasn't written yet, but for the first time in decades, the pen was finally in my hand. And whatever came next, it would be on my terms. The week after my coffee with Carolyn passed gently, almost quietly enough for me to forget that a month earlier my life had nearly come apart. Almost. But reminders have a way of finding you, even when you least expect them. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Hot, dry, the kind of heat that makes the air feel like it's humming. I'd spent the morning assembling shelves in the garage, turning the newly reclaimed space into a real workshop again. I'd just stepped inside for water when the doorbell rang. For a moment, I froze. Very few people rang my doorbell these days. Neighbors texted. Salespeople avoided the long driveway. Delivery drivers left packages and moved on. Whoever stood on the other side of that door wanted something. I set down the glass and walked to the entryway. Through the frosted glass, I saw a figure. Slender. Still familiar. I opened the door. Jenna stood on my porch. Not dressed in designer clothes this time. No tailored blazer. No expensive handbag. Just jeans and a plain white t-shirt, hair tied back, makeup minimal. She looked younger, so much younger, without the armor she usually wore. "Hi, Dad," she said softly. I hadn't heard her voice that soft in years. I didn't step aside. I didn't invite her in. But I didn't shut the door either. What do you need, Jenna? She took a breath and looked around the porch as if gathering strength. I wanted to talk. Just talk. Then quickly. No money. Nothing like that. I swear. I studied her face. She wasn't lying. Not this time. Not today. I nodded once and stepped back. She entered slowly, like she expected the floor to collapse under her. We sat in the living room, me in my chair, her on the far end of the couch, where Brian used to sprawl like a king. For a moment, neither of us spoke. She looked around the room, noticing the emptiness, the calmness. This place looks different, she said quietly. Cleaner. Lighter. It is, I said. She nodded, then clasped her hands tightly in her lap. I don't know where to start, she said. I've been doing a lot of thinking. A lot. She swallowed hard. The divorce is final. Samuel and we ended up losing money. A lot of it. That tends to happen, I said calmly. A faint, humorless smile flickered across her face. Yeah. Turns out scheming isn't a great foundation for a marriage. She rubbed her eyes. I'm not here to excuse anything. I'm not here to pretend I didn't cross lines. I know what I did. I know what I said. I know I hurt you. Her voice shook, but she kept going. And I know you don't owe me anything. Not forgiveness. Not a relationship. Not even your time. She looked down at her hands. I came because I don't like who I became. Silence settled between us. Outside, a bird chirped. The air conditioner hummed. Inside, my daughter sat admitting, for the first time, the truth about herself. After several seconds, she continued. When Mom died, I thought I had to step up. Be perfect. Be successful. Make you proud. And somewhere along the way I started believing money meant approval. Stuff meant love. And it twisted things. Her voice cracked on the last word. I'm not blaming anyone but myself. I made choices. Bad ones. She looked up at me. I'm sorry, Dad. Really, truly sorry. There was the apology I never expected to hear. Not for the wedding. Not for the schemes. Not for the betrayal. But for herself. I didn't speak at first. I wanted to choose my words carefully. Jenna, I finally said, I don't hate you. I never did. But I won't pretend things didn't happen. I know, she whispered. You shouldn't. But, I added, I believe people can change when they truly want to. Her eyes filled suddenly, as if she hadn't expected any mercy. I do want to, she said. I want to be better. For myself, not for money or convenience or manipulation. I want to be someone you're not ashamed of. I leaned back in my chair. I was never ashamed of you, I said quietly. Just disappointed in the choices you made. That's different. She nodded, wiping her cheek. I get that. We talked for almost an hour. Not about money. Not about the trust. Not about anything I'd done for protection. We talked about her job. Her apartment. The guilt she'd been sitting with. How Samuel had revealed his true colors immediately after the separation, confirming everything she had refused to see. She didn't ask for a penny. She didn't circle the conversation toward finances. She didn't angle for access to the house. She just talked like my daughter again. Before she left, she paused at the door. Can I come by again sometime? Just to talk. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't perfect. But she wasn't pretending either. Yes, I said. You can. She nodded, tears welling again, then stepped outside. Thank you, Dad, she said. She walked to her car, got in, and drove away slowly. For the first time in years, I felt hope, not the naive kind that expects everything to magically heal, but the grounded kind built on small steps. Jenna might never be the daughter I once imagined, but she might become someone real, someone honest. And that was enough. I closed the door gently and stood in the quiet entryway, sunlight filtering through the glass. Peace didn't mean isolation. Peace didn't mean pushing everyone away. Peace meant choosing who I let in, and under what terms. I walked back to the terrace, poured a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down with my guitar. My phone buzzed, a message from Carolyn. Looking forward to coffee again next week. Hope you're having a good day. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, it truly was. 1 week after Jenna's visit, life settled into a new, unexpected rhythm. Morning coffee on the terrace. Guitar practice in the afternoons. Volunteer work at the senior center. Occasional check-ins with my store managers. And messages from Carolyn, light, warm, easy conversations that felt like sunlight cracking through a long, overcast sky. I didn't know where that would lead, and for once, I wasn't trying to predict it. Then, on a quiet Thursday afternoon, the past knocked on my door again. But this time, it wasn't Jenna. It wasn't Wendy. It wasn't even one of their scattered attempts at guilt or manipulation. It was someone I never expected. The doorbell rang. 3 short presses. Not impatient, just unfamiliar. I opened the door. And standing there, shifting nervously on the welcome mat, was Brian Keller. Wendy's old boyfriend. My former house parasite. The man who had sprawled across my furniture for 4 years, demanded money, insulted me in my own home, and treated responsibility like a disease. He looked different. Thinner. Rougher. Tired around the eyes. Not the cocky, smirking version of himself I had grown used to. "Harris," he said, clearing his throat. I hope you don't mind me stopping by." Yes, I did. But I wasn't interested in unnecessary conflict. "What do you want, Brian?" He exhaled slowly. "I won't take much of your time. I swear." I didn't invite him in. He didn't ask. He just stood there, awkward, fidgeting, completely unlike the person who once treated my home as his kingdom. "I'm not here to fight," he said. "And I don't want money." That caught my attention. Brian never turned down an opportunity to take money. "I came to apologize," he said finally. The word hung in the desert air like something unnatural. I crossed my arms. "Why now?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking ashamed. "Because life hit me in the face," he said simply. "And I needed it." He glanced at the driveway as if expecting someone to pull up and save him. "When you kicked us out, I was furious. Thought you were cruel. Thought you betrayed Wendy." He shook his head. "But living with her afterwards? It was a nightmare. The smallest thing went wrong. She blamed me. Rent was short? My fault. Car needed work? My fault. Apartment too small? Also my fault." He laughed bitterly. "She even blamed the Arizona heat on me once." I raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. "I wish I were kidding." His voice lowered. "You were right, Harris. She never wanted to be an adult. She wanted a rescuer. And I enabled it. More than anyone." He looked down at the concrete. "I know I treated you like garbage. I took advantage of your kindness. I acted like your house belonged to me. And when you finally put your foot down, instead of taking responsibility, I called you every name in the book." He looked up. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "You didn't deserve any of that." I didn't speak. "Not yet." Brian swallowed hard. "I'm working construction now," he said. "Long hours. Crappy pay. But honest work." He managed a small smile. "I'm earning my first real paycheck next week." It struck me. This was the first time he had ever spoken like a man instead of a leech. "I moved out," he added. "A month after the eviction. Wendy, she didn't want to grow. She wanted another Harris. And I wasn't going to be that again." Another silence settled. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't rewriting history. He was owning it. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "And I'm not here to make you feel bad for kicking us out. You shouldn't. You saved me from myself." He stepped back from the door. "I just wanted you to know I'm trying. Really trying. And thank you for the wake-up call. Even if it hurt." I nodded slowly. "You're taking responsibility," I said. "That matters." He seemed relieved just to hear that. "Well, that's all I wanted to say." He turned to leave. "Brian," I said. He stopped. "You said you're working construction?" He nodded. "Good. Stick with it. Don't go back." A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "I won't. I promise." He walked down the driveway, got into a dusty pickup truck, and drove off. Not triumphant. Not smug. Just human. I closed the door and stood in the quiet entryway. The world had shifted again, not in ways I feared, but in ways I didn't expect. If Brian could start turning his life around, then what else was possible? I went to the terrace, sat with fresh coffee, and let the warm air wrap around me. For the second time that week, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. Hope, for other people, not just myself. Life wasn't perfect. It never would be. But people, even deeply flawed people, could change when forced to face the truth. I picked up my guitar and began practicing the chord progression Carl assigned me. Sloppy, imperfect, but improving. As I played, my phone buzzed with a new message. From Carolyn. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. I found a little bakery I think you'll like. I smiled. Change wasn't just possible. It was happening, quietly, steadily, naturally. And for once, I welcomed it. After everything that had happened, the wedding, the betrayal, the legal battles, the eviction, the months of silence, I found myself settling into a life I never expected but always needed. My house, once heavy with tension, now breathed again. Mornings on the terrace became a ritual. A cup of coffee, the sun rising over Paradise Valley, and the quiet realization that peace was something I had earned, not something anyone had the power to take from me anymore. Jenna began visiting occasionally, no longer dressed in luxury or carrying entitlement, but sitting across from me with an honesty I had almost forgotten she possessed. She never asked for money. She asked for conversation, for a chance to rebuild something real. And little by little, she did. Brian, surprisingly, found his way too. He stopped by once to apologize, genuinely, humbly, without excuses. He had a construction job now, a steadier life, the rough beginnings of responsibility settling onto him like something he had long needed but never admitted. Wendy remained distant, silent for months, until a short handwritten letter arrived. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I'm trying. W. I kept the letter, not as proof, not as leverage, but as hope. Meanwhile, my connection with Carolyn deepened with a gentle steadiness I didn't try to define. We shared coffee, long talks, quiet moments in small bakeries and parks. She never wanted anything from me except presence, and after years surrounded by people who wanted access to my resources more than access to me, her sincerity felt like a warm wind cutting through a long, cold season. My guitar lessons continued, clumsy but joyful, the chords messy yet meaningful. I turned the guest house into a workshop and reading nook, a place where I built things with my hands again, birdhouses, shelves, picture frames, simple projects that reminded me of who I had been before my life became crowded with demands and entitlements. The trust remained intact, protecting everything I built, not out of fear, but out of wisdom earned through painful lessons. One evening, months after the storm had passed, I sat on my terrace as the sun melted into the desert horizon, guitar resting on my lap. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ache but comforts. Carolyn would come for dinner the next night. Jenna planned a visit over the weekend. Wendy's letters sat in the drawer inside, waiting for whatever came next. And for the first time in a very long time, I understood something clearly. I hadn't lost my family, I had simply stopped letting dysfunction define it. The people who wanted to grow were growing. The people who weren't ready were learning on their own. And I, after years of being drained, manipulated, and taken for granted, had finally chosen myself. As the desert breeze moved through the evening and the last light faded, I played a soft chord, imperfect but honest. My life was no longer built on guilt, obligation, or fear. It was built on boundaries, truth, and peace. I hadn't just saved my home. I had saved myself. And that made all the difference.